Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nicole Lewis-Rogers. I'm one of the program directors. Ashley Kirkham, the other program director. And so the two of us will be leading the meeting tonight, and Jerry Lynn will be helping us out, telling us a little bit about some new technology he's using. Do you want to come to the... Yeah.
Okay. All right, I am in charge of the announcements for this evening.
Are you going to announce that we're moving your beach tomorrow morning?
I do need to move 7 hives 150 feet, so I'm not happy about that. But we can talk about that later. Okay, so tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about announcements, which I'm going to talk about, and then Nicole's going to talk about around the apiary, and then Jerry is going to speak. If you've missed any of our meetings, they're all on YouTube, and they get posted 2 weeks after, usually. Yeah, around 2 weeks after.
Hopefully.
We would like to encourage people to come in person, so. We've had a couple of community events lately, the Ladybug Festival and the Leonardo Spring Festival, so we just wanted to thank all of our volunteers who were there, and both of them, I think, were good turnouts. And
Yeah, there was over 250 kids at the Ladybug Festival, and about probably 80 or 90 people at the Leonardo, smaller venue.
And on that note, we have some upcoming volunteer opportunities for everyone. At the very end of the month, Friday the 27th, Gordon Food Services, and Julie can speak a little bit more about this if we've got more questions. You're a food supplier?
Yeah, you want me to just tell everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so we got a phone call on the swarm line a couple months ago from a lady who, Gordon Food Services, they're a commercial like food supplier, kind of like Cisco or somebody like that. And so they have their annual sales like convention for all of their people and awards trip and stuff. And so this year it's in Salt Lake. And they always try to find a nonprofit to support in the city where they are. So they chose Wasatch Beekeepers. And so then while they're at the breakfast that Friday morning at the Little America, we need volunteers to help us set up the event and then stay and encourage people, answer questions. But they'll have QR codes. So basically it's a fundraising event, and the people that come to breakfast will use the QR codes for our Zelle or Venmo and PayPal to make donations to the organization. And then Nicole and I last night sat at her house and made little 1.5 ounce jars of honey that say thank you on top of the little honey dipper to give them, and they purchased them for us to do that. So the club didn't use their money to do that, but we're gonna give them, if they make a donation, then they'll turn around and give us we'll give them a little honey jar as a little thank you. Yeah. So what we need that morning is help carrying the stuff in. We'll have an observation hive and some like brochures and things like that, some educational material, and just to meet and greet people and just thank them so much for their donation to the club, answer any questions they may have about pollinators or honeybees or whatever. We'll be done by 9 a.m. for sure. I imagine we'll be done a little bit before that, but again, it's at the Little America on Friday morning.
Grand America. The Grand America.
Grand. That's the bigger one, the
Is it the
cooler
Grand?
one.
Across the street.
That's what she told me.
Grand America.
Okay, well, I will clarify which hotel we'll be at, but it's probably the Grand. It's probably the Grand. I just have so many other work meetings at the Little America. I have the Little America on my head, but anyway, hopefully it's at the Grand.
Early in the morning, I might think.
Yeah, it's very early. It's going to be
So I have
very
to
early.
sign up, and we need 1 or 2 more people. So if you'd like to participate, please sign up.
When is it?
Friday the 27th.
Next week.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah, a week from Friday.
Yeah.
And you'll have the whole rest of your day free to go inspect your hives.
Thank you.
All right, another fun upcoming volunteer activity that we've been invited to participate in is Redview's having a pollinator party, and that's Monday, June 30th. And it's in the evening, and I was on their website today looking up what it was, and it's for friends and family, and they're gonna have, I think they're gonna do like make your own little, you know, the bee motels for, you know, the mason bees or the orchard bees. There's gonna be face painting. Wasatch Beekeepers is gonna have a booth that if people have questions about pollinators or honeybees in particular. So if you would like to volunteer, we need 1 or 2 volunteers for that evening. And then you get to go hang out and explore Redview Gardens, which is really neat.
Yeah. And you don't have to know much about anything about bees. Typically the questions are very simple, straightforward, and you know, we just need people who are enthusiastic and want to share, you know, their interest in beekeeping.
Yep. The next activity is Bug Fest. This is August 9th and 10th. It's up at the Natural History Museum up at the U. And we've done this the last few years. And again, we set up a table. We need volunteers for setup throughout the day and for takedown on Sunday. We need hopefully 15 volunteers, and it is also a lovely weekend, and you get to be at the Natural History Museum.
And the volunteer shifts are not all day that day, right? They're just like
They're in
2 or
shorter
3 hour
blocks.
shifts.
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't have to feel like if you
Yeah.
sign up that you're signing up for an all day event. You can sign up for a shift.
And the shift times are on there.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, like Nicole said, you don't need to be an expert. You just, you know, kids come by and ask questions, and it's really fun. All right, probably the biggest event of the year is the Utah State Fair, and we need at least 67 volunteers because it's 10 days long, and we have a booth there with a beautiful observation hive. School children come through on field trips during the day. Families come. And again, the questions are pretty simple. And at least when the school kids come by, they have like these pieces of paper that they're running from booth to booth asking questions about honeybees. Most of them stand in front of the observation hive and you're trying to help them find the queen. And you usually get a cool Wasatch Beekeepers Association t-shirt if you volunteer. So please volunteer to sign up for that too.
So the sign-up sheet hasn't been made. It was supposed, it will be an online sign-up form. We won't be doing anything handwritten. And as soon as that is ready to go, I'll send it out with the next newsletter. So that way you can budget it in, since it's so far in advance.
And if you have any questions, you can contact Nicole.
Yes.
Don't ask me.
Is the schedule, would we be signing up just as a volunteer, or would we be scheduling ourselves at that
You'll be
point?
scheduling yourself, just like usual. So you get to choose the day, the time.
So we can do it a couple times if we want to.
Yes,
Yes.
that would be wonderful.
So rather than
Three.
67 people, you need 67
Seven.
slots filled.
Yes.
Filled.
Yes.
I see.
Some of us are robbins with lunch.
It's fun, it's exhausting. Bring something to
So
drink.
if you took a 4-hour slot, then that's 2.
5 times, 6 times?
Bring lots and lots.
Six times?
I think so.
Something like
I
that.
was
And it's-
there a
it's
couple
kinda
times
easier
before that,
to
but I was out of town
Do
last
them in
year.
larger chunks, because sometimes there's nobody there.
Yeah.
The year before that.
And then you're
I was
looking at the
there.
flowers and the giant corn stalks and stuff that's in the
Same
room with
room.
us.
Is that for the fair?
Yeah.
For the
Oh,
Board of Food Services?
All right, so that sign-up sheet will be emailed out to everyone, and then you can just pick your day and time, days and times that you would like to volunteer.
Yep.
I don't know anything about the honey judge.
Okay,
If you
so. The fair is, they need people to judge the honey. This year, they've expanded won't be just liquid honey, there'll be creamed honey, it can be creamed flavored honey, comb honey, but it's just the comb without it being surrounded by, without it surrounded by liquid honey. And last year, at the last minute, my husband and I did the judging, and it took us 4 hours to do, I think, 32 jars of honey. So we need at least 3 people who would like to be involved. It's very simple. It's the instructions for judging is you judge the honey on its merit to the ideal. It's very Plutonian, you know, the ideal, philosophical ideal. And so therefore there can be lots of first place, second place, and third place, but then there's only one best of show.
It's not a tasting, it is on looks, right?
It's on looks and then you taste it.
Okay.
So if you're a judge, make sure you have a good meal before you come to.
Make sure you're not diabetic.
Not diabetic, yeah.
Take your insulin.
Yeah, so there is a rubric, and if we don't get one from the fair, I will make one so that it's streamlined, and that we can have one person use a refractometer to see how much water, and someone holding it up to the light to see if they see dog hair and other stuff in there.
Wait, are you outing me or something? No, I'm just kidding.
And then there's taste, and then there's things like, are there fingerprints on the outside of the jar? Is there honey on the top part of the lid? All sorts of little things. But all that information is available at their website, but it's not easy to find, so I will give you the link so you know how to enter your honey, what are the parameters by which your honey will be judged, the dates, all that jazz. But we would love to have lots of judges.
So we don't need to contact you, we contact Sakura Gallegos?
Yeah, Sakura is how she pronounces it.
Sakura.
It says September 4th to the 14th, but judging is September 2nd.
That's correct.
Oh,
So
The
we have
volunteers
oh,
at the booth is the 4th through the 14th.
okay.
And then you have to submit your honey like the 29th of August or something like that.
Yeah, that ain't happening for me.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and it's paid. So if you, and I don't know how much they pay. But again, contact her, and then
Only
the other.
free admission, I think.
No, I give you $6 for first place and you don't get the honey back.
The other thing they are trying to incorporate more of a sense of a community for the state fair, so they're having demonstrations in the Zion building.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. They want you to actually be there and make something in front of people using honey and bee products?
Yes.
I can live with that.
And you could do it like a cooking show where you say, okay, here's the wax, and then you melt it, and like, oh, here's the melted wax, and then you would pour it into molds, and this is how you make candles. You know, it could be something that's fairly short. Or you walk them through how to do soap or lotion or flavoring honey.
I made a lot of different kinds of salves and that sort of thing. Is that what they're looking for, something like that?
They are looking for anything. And so the hope is, last year we had some people who put together presentations, but we weren't on the calendar. So I'm hoping if we do this early enough, we'll be on the calendar, people will know about it. And just to get more involvement with the community and sort of give people something else to do when they're at the fair. So again, if you've got ideas, any kind of idea, I think would be of interest. And yeah, again, contact Sakura.
And I would assume they're doing it on days that are not the field trip days. If you want it when
They have
more
particular
people are
time.
there.
Yeah, so children typically come in before the fair opens. The fair opens at 10. Kids usually come in between 8 and 9. They didn't do it last year, but maybe this year they will. And that's usually when we're mobbed with students coming through because they have a scavenger hunt sheet where they're trying to fill in all the information and then they get some kind of prize at, you know, when they're done cruising through the fair. Yeah, but I don't know what the times would be.
we have a t-shirt contest so that we can all wear matching t-shirts at the fair. And this, you can see that was the logo that we had from last year. This was from 2 years ago, so they can be kind of computerized. This was hand-drawn. They just need to say Wasatch Beekeepers Association on it, and they are great. I love my last 2 years t-shirt. I gave a bunch for Christmas last year. And it's really fun to wear, because when you wear them out and about, people always ask you about being a beekeeper.
And
So-
all the rules and regs, they're in the newsletter. If you didn't get the newsletter, they're pinned to the top of our Facebook page. And hopefully soon it will be on our website.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so everyone submit something. It'd be really awesome to get a few different submissions, and then we will let you know what the final project is. And, and the contest ends June 30th, so you've got a little bit of time to think about it and submit something. In November 8th,
I think so.
is our annual Beekeepers Banquet, and we always have a silent auction, and so we would love anyone who wants to donate anything to the auction, and it raises money for us to have speakers and all sorts of things throughout the year. T-shirts. If you've got bee-themed items, wonderful. If you've got other items too, let us know. And we do have space where we can, if you have something now, we have some space where we could store it until November. So start thinking about that. And we need mentors.
Yeah.
Yeah, we desperately need mentors. And so, again,
Anybody in Mill Creek need mentoring?
We need more people at work.
yeah.
You need people.
I'll mentor somebody, just hook me up.
Okay, talk to me after the meeting. I have some, I think.
I mean, I'm, 1.5 years into the party, but I probably know a little bit. I have Eldon as a mentor, so he's.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
past 1.5 years then.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you decide you want to be a mentor, please email Henry.
Yep.
He will.
We always need mentors.
We need more out in Totown.
Okay.
That's where I live. And I feel bad because she had to drive so far. Sorry.
I know.
It's a long drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's out there. But it was worth it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm mentoring someone up in Summit County, so. But you also, if you want to be a mentor, you can also do things on the phone or through text. You don't always have to go, if you do not have time to go through someone's hive with them. Sometimes you just need a quick photo and someone has a quick question. So you can do only what you can do. And the last announcement is that we will not be meeting in July. There's a lot of family vacations and other things happening, so we will reconvene in August. Okay, that's the announcements.
Thank you. All right. So these are what I think, and if you guys have ideas of what else we should bring up, please contribute that to the conversation. So these are my ideas of what we should be thinking about mid-June to mid-July. And so for most of us, nectar flow is on, the bees are very busy, and populations are going to increase dramatically. But as you know, there's always this variability among the hives in your apiaries, so when you've got a weaker hive, you may want to consider combining it with a stronger hive, giving that weaker hive some extra brood from a strong hive, requeening, because right now you are preparing for success through the winter. If you don't have your populations up high, your success is going to be a lot lower. I've been keeping data sheets for the last 7 years, and consistently the hives that go into winter where they're just bursting with bees, they're the ones that come out really productive in the spring. And the ones that are just sort of mediocre, or even high but not super high, they still struggle during the winter because there's a lot of attrition, a lot of die-off in the winter. So for most of us, the major flow is going to be in June and into the first 2 weeks or so, maybe 3 in July. And so you should be seeing a lot of white comb in your hive. And if you're not, especially if you got a nuke or you got a package this year, then you probably want to continue feeding until they stop taking it. Because it's going to take nectar to stimulate those wax glands for them to build new comb. We're going to have really hot temperatures tomorrow, and so you want to be thinking about how you're going to help your bees cool off. Bees can handle most cold temperatures, but it's the heat that's really difficult for them to cope with. So you'll see bearding. This is an example of what bearding looks like on the outside of the hive. You probably see it in the evening where more individuals are spending the night outside rather than inside the hive because it's too warm. So things you can do is you can provide some afternoon shade. I have one hive where I have one of those triangle tarps because it's in the corner of a yard, and I just attach it to the 2 sides of the fence. And that works really well. And as long as it's up, you know, like 1.5 feet or a little more, then the bees don't have a problem with navigating even over the top of the hive. I love this idea. I don't know if you can see it in this lighting, but it's a permanent structure, and then there's a garden on top. So it's actually reducing the heat impact from the roof structure, and then the bees are in shade.
Peter, the county inspector, he says he puts like a 3x3 piece of plywood just on top of the hive.
Just
for
to give
shade.
it shade.
Yeah, just like that. I'm trying to get, but he taught a class on last Saturday at Lynn Farm, or part of the class, and he said he just puts a sheet of plywood.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've done that, but what I do is I make a little space so that you've got shade and you've also got some circulation, so
Yeah.
you're not holding more heat down with the plywood.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
So maybe a couple of blocks of
You
wood.
just put like 4 bricks on there and put it on top
Yeah,
of that,
yeah.
so yeah.
You still keeping the hive hugger
I
insulation on?
do keep, I keep insulation on the top throughout the summer. And I think my bees have done well since I started doing that. I did it last summer too.
Yeah, I'm gonna
And I
put
didn't
it
see as
back
much
on.
bearding.
Yeah,
I have cottage roofs that have a space in the roof, and I keep the insulation, my winter insulation, in the cottage roof through the summer. And ever since I started doing that, they don't beard as much, because, when they're bearding, they're not making honey, they're cooling the hive. And so, if you keep the hive cooler, then they're out doing what they need to be doing, and they don't beard near as bad when I insulate the top of it.
excellent.
One of the things that I tried also is I'll just put an empty super above the
Inner cover.
inner cover, thank you. Just so that there's a little more room.
Yeah, like
and then
an
I
attic.
kind of cock the lid a little bit so that it's just a crack, so it's not enough that rubber beads are gonna come in, but you get a little more circulation. It's sort of like having an attic with ventilation, if you've got an empty box.
All right, excellent. So because we're in the nectar flow, you want to make sure that there's enough space. And that if you start seeing that you've got honey all around where you've got capped brood, and there's nectar, around there, we call that backfilling. And so as soon as that brood hatches, they're going to continue to put more nectar in that space. And so the bees will store honey and not leave the queen much space to lay. So you want to keep watching that, and as you see frames filling up, either move them up to another box or pull them out and put in new frames so the queen has plenty of space to lay eggs. Even though it's been a pretty slow swarm season, swarming is still a possibility this time of year, especially if they get honey bound, if they get too much honey in the brood space and there's not enough room. So on average, when there's 7 frames that are full of brood or nectar and pollen or honey, you want to add another box, or you want to add your honey super if this is your first spring and summer. But you want to think about the timing of it. So if you're going to be adding honey supers, now's the time to add more. You don't want to add it in late July or in August, because one, they may not have, especially if you don't have drawn out comb, they may not have the resources, the wax to make new comb, to be able to put enough in there, so you'll end up with just smatterings of honey in the new super or in the new brood box. Let's see what I have here. Right, so if you have a super that is full but it's not capped, and you have frames with foundation, the suggestion is to put that underneath. But today in our apiary, Jerry was saying he always just puts the new super, even if it doesn't have any drum comb, right on top, and that works well too.
There it is. Some people like top super, some bottom super.
It's a lot of heavy lifting if you bottom super them.
Yeah, top super has always worked
Okay.
for me.
And then if you have your super that's full but not fully capped, and you have frames with comb, and you can do this method even if you don't have frames with comb, is you can checkerboard. And we've sort of talked about this before in terms of controlling the brood chamber for swarming, but you can do the same type of thing with your honey supers, where you have an empty frame, either with or without comb, and then your frame with honey. And so this would be the top super, this is the bottom super. And that's one way to get them to draw the comb straight, to encourage them to come up and start drawing comb, because it's sandwiched between two frames that have honey.
So is that only when you add a second box to it? Okay.
And you could even do this if you only have one honey super, but you have lots of frames. You could take those frames out, store them so they don't get infested with ants or something else, and then you could also checkerboard it. So that's another option.
Now, that doesn't confuse the bees?
I don't know.
I mean, I've always thought you're supposed to put the frame back in exactly the same spot.
We're
but-
talking about the honey super.
Yes,
So the honey super is not as important, because the reason why you want to put everything in the order in which you take it from the brood box
so
is
the,
the nurse
that's
bees
the thing
know.
about the brood box. Keep the brood box similar, but then the honey, okay.
Yeah, because the
Alright.
idea is the nurse bees need to know where those larvae are, because the larvae get fed like 10,000 times a day. And so if you move it, suddenly you take a bunch of larvae and you move it to the outer edge of your brood box. By the time the nurses get over there, it could be too late for some of those individuals. So it just impacts the rate at which your population increases. And then in the winter or in the fall, right, it's more important to keep all the brood together, because you want to keep them, you want the bees to cluster and keep them warm. But we don't have to worry about that right now. Any other questions? All right. So when you're looking at your frames, you want to evaluate, well, what does a good frame look like? What does a mediocre frame look like? And so what you want to look for is something that looks like this. It's like the, I don't know what people call it, something rainbow.
Semicircle.
Yeah, it's like the
It's like
The
the
honeybee
bee bread, it's
rainbow.
the bee bread rainbow.
bee bread rainbow. Yeah, so you're going to have a brood nest in the center, and then you're going to have honey typically up in the corners of the frame, and then you're going to have a band of pollen and a band of nectar. So this is like having the refrigerator in your nursery. So as those bees, as the larvae workers and the drones become 4 days old, then they're going to start getting that combination of pollen and nectar. So the food's right there. You're always going to see some spaces where there isn't brood. And sometimes you'll see these spaces and they've got nectar in them. And it's due to either the workers aren't capped those brood because they detected mites. Maybe the queen just skipped a spot as she's walking around. But this is a good sign. This is typical of what a good brood frame looks like. Whereas compare it to this one, and you notice that there's a lot of, it's much more random, the pattern of the brood being capped. And unfortunately, because of the lighting, we can't see, but there's only honey here. There's no pollen, there's no nectar. So this is an indication that you don't have a nectar flow going on, and your hive is starving because there's no protein, there's no pollen. And so this is when you would say, okay, maybe I'm gonna start to feed, maybe 2 to 1 or 1 to 1 serve, depending on the time in the summer and early fall. Maybe you're gonna give them a pollen substitute.
Can that also possibly be a laying worker?
If it were a laying worker, then you would see that it would be all drone. And unfortunately, I think you can see that it's pretty flat. So this is all worker brood, but there's just not enough resources for them to feed all those larvae. So the larvae are dying, and then they're pulling them out of the cells and getting rid of them. Or it could be something wrong with your queen and she's not laying well. She's run out of sperm, for example. But if you were to, when the queen runs out of sperm, you'll see a whole bunch of drones capped, and then you'll see the workers modifying smaller worker cells to accommodate the larger drone cell bodies that are going to be in there. So you'll see that they're really, really tall because the cells are narrow. So anyway, this is what you want to see. This is when you call your mentor or somebody else and you start thinking about what's going wrong with the hive.
Like on my brood boxes, the outer 1 to 2 frames are just solid honey.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty typical.
Yes,
And-
absolutely.
And call.
Yeah. And then the 5 or 6 frames in the middle are the,
Yeah. Yeah, so you want to see those frames that are full of pollen and capped honey on the ends there for sure. So my mantra, monitor for varroa mites. You're going to need to treat with temperature appropriate chemicals and hopefully implement an integrated pest management process. So this is where you do things like a brood break so that there isn't a lot of larvae available for those mites to infest. Or you're removing all the extra drone this time of year because most of the matings are over with.
How many on a frame? What's a common amount of drone cells? Is it 5% or?
Typically, you're going to see the drones cells built below the frame. Sometimes they will modify cells on the sides.
And so when you pull out the frame, you're ripping apart the drone cells. And you'll see like white larvae and that sort of.
And do you scrape that off?
I do. And I always take a look. So, and that's one way for me to sort of estimate how the mite treatments are going. Because if I see mites in with my drone larvae, I know that my mite treatment's not working as well as if I don't see a lot of that, you know, because it's a small sample size. So with a small sample size, you should see no mites at all. But if you're seeing mites and you've only cracked open 20 or 30 drone cells, then you know you've got to switch up what you're doing.
and then can you just leave that wax out for the bees so that they can reuse it, or?
Oh, what do I do with the wax? Usually when it's got the larvae in it, I pull it out and take it away. I don't leave wax when I'm working in my hives. I don't leave the wax on the ground because I don't want to attract raccoons or skunks or rats.
And you step in it and you attract it in the house. And your wife is
Exactly.
very sad.
Yeah.
Your wife looks at you like 3 times and say, "This is a hobby?"
Then you come out of the carpet very well.
A lot of cleaning involved. Yeah, so what do you guys do besides, do you guys use other methods besides chemicals to control mites?
I put in a super frame in my brood box, and then they build drone underneath it. And then I can just zip it off every so often. So instead of using like a green board,
Right.
they'll almost always build drone brood underneath a super frame, but put it down in the deeper boxes.
So how many do you put in there?
I just do one at a time.
Or you could put in a deep frame without foundation, and the bees will just build it out typically for drones. And then once it's full, you just cut out the whole thing and you've just eliminated a bunch of mites from your hive. Any other approaches you guys use? All right. Two really good resources, Honeybee Health Coalition. It's a little bit out of date in terms of the treatments, chemical treatments they're suggesting. Connecticut Beekeepers Association is another really great resource, but again, they are a little bit out of date, and I will talk about that in just a moment. So I don't know if you guys went or attended the Utah Beekeepers Association. But Jenna Crowder and Joey Caputo gave a presentation about the status of varroa mites in the state. And what they found, and all those red dots, those are all the localities where they were testing bees that were sent in for mites, and then they were testing the mites for resistance to different miticides that are available on the market. And what they found was 92% of all the mites sampled were 100% resistant to amatraz, which is a bummer because that is what most people like to use this time of year or earlier and then after the nectar flow. So it is important that you start figuring out what else you're going to do besides chemicals to control mites, because mites have a very rapid rate of reproduction, and just through natural genetic variation, there are going to be some individuals that are just naturally resistant to any of the chemicals we use. So you can't rely on just using one method, because if you do, you're just going to be selecting for a population that is totally resistant. If you're interested in reading their report and how they did what they did, and more details about the findings, there's a QR code here, and of course this will all be uploaded to YouTube at some time. So, amatraz is the active ingredient in Apivar and Amaflex. So, don't waste your money in buying those.
Can you go back to your QR code? I think some people were trying to scan it.
Okay. Good. All right, so this is the table, and I don't expect you to be able to read it, but this is the table from the Connecticut Beekeepers Association. And even so, because we've got a dinky little screen here, what I just want to highlight is it's a really nice resource because they have essential oils, organic acids, and then they have chemical miticides. And then they tell you what the active ingredient is. It will tell you how, in general, you use it, although before you use it, you always want to read the manufacturer's directions. How effective it is, the efficacy, how long you would leave it on, so you can sort of plan it into your beekeeping calendar about when you would use certain chemicals, the temperature requirements, whether or not you can have your honey super. What about the population of the brood in your hive? It takes that into account, and then how large the colony is, and then there are some separate notes, and then when you go to their website, what is totally blurry here, can't make it any better, they're active links to the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, where you can look at more information. And so, but at the bottom of this, it still mentions that Apivar is a good option, but we know that most of our bees are coming from California, so if 92% of our mites here in Utah are resistant, you know that they're resistant across the nation, probably into Canada, and who knows, maybe it's also worldwide at this point. But this is their website, and they've been a state club since the late 1800s. So a lot of really great information there. Okay, so this is sort of continuing the conversation about how do you keep your hives from overheating? How do you help your bees out? So you can put popsicle sticks on the corners between all of the boxes in your hive to provide a little bit of ventilation, not large enough for anybody to get in really, but just enough for airflow. Have an entrance in your inner cover. You can stagger the supers slightly. Screen bottom board, add an empty medium or deep to the top of the hive to create that attic space. I even use the double screen bottom board just underneath the lid to create more ventilation, but I think I'm going to add my hive hugger installation back to the top of the hives. The other critical thing is fresh water. So I don't know if anyone checked out the links that were included in the newsletter this month, but it was all about water bees and how there's a small percentage of the foragers that instead of going out every day and collecting pollen and nectar, what they do is they collect water all day. And then they come back in and it's laid on the comb, and then the bees are fanning their wings, so they're using evaporative cooling inside, or they bring the water back to feed it to the bees that are in the hive, because like every other living thing, everybody needs water. So how do you provide safe water? You got to have some place where the bees, the water is not too deep, they've got places to stand. I like this idea of using moss and other things. That way it's just sort of a seeping, like a seeping pond or something like that. I know a couple of beekeepers who instead of use the same method where they do internal feeding with syrup, but instead it's just water. So you can either put it directly over the inner cover, or you could create like a little space, and then you would put a deep or a honey super on top. Let's see, last summer, Gree Herring was putting in pint jars, and they were being sucked dry every day. So they were taking the water that she supplied inside the hive.
Koi pond?
Huh?
Koi pond?
Koi pond, yeah, there you go. All right, so how long do you keep adding supers? When you're about 2 weeks at the end of your nectar flow. How do you know when this is? You got to start paying attention to what's flowering in your area. For the Salt Lake area, it's typically mid-July. Oh, I wanted to point out the bee supply, even though they are in Texas, that's another great resource for all sorts of questions about anything having to do with beekeeping. So how much honey do you harvest? So if you have one brood box, the suggestion is leave all the honey in the bottom brood box, at least 4 full frames of honey. And then start feeding this. So this is going to be mostly for people who have nukes and packages this year. You're going to, as soon as the nectar flow is done, and you'll know when the nectar flow is over because you won't be seeing that bright white wax being built in your hive, and the foragers will get a lot more protective. So if you're not using smoke right now, you'll probably be having to use smoke a bit when you do your inspections after the nectar flow is over. So you would feed a 2-to-1 sugar syrup, so that's 2 cups of sugar for every cup of water. And don't use outdoor feeding, but choose some type of method where you're feeding inside the hive to avoid robbing. If you have 2 brood boxes, you can leave all the honey in the bottom box. If you plan on feeding, then take up to half of the honey in the top brood box. Because remember, you want about 8 frames of honey in the winter for your if you're going to overwinter in 2 deeps. If you don't plan on feeding, then leave about 40 pounds of honey in the upper brood box. One thing about feeding this time of year, or later in the summer when it's still really hot, even a 2-to-1 sugar solution is going to have a lot of water in it, meaning that fungus will grow. So if the bees aren't fully consuming all of that syrup within 7 days max, you want to get rid of it. If you're using a container like a mason jar, you want to clean it with bleach. So a 10% bleach solution. And then you want to make sure you rinse it, because fungus. They have very sticky, fibrous membranes that will stick to glass, and so the bleach will make sure that they're gone. But they'll come back because there's fungus in your sugar. It's just, fungus is naturally everywhere in the air. And so just make sure that you use good hygiene and change out that syrup. So, when you've got all this honey and you need to get those bees out and off the frames, we use different kinds of bee escapes. And Jerry was going to talk about something new that
You ready for me?
I'm ready.
Yeah, we need to get the honey off. Another thing, you know, if you hit one hive, probably the easiest way to do it is with a bee brush. So you have an empty box, take the frame out, take your bee brush and brush them off and move on to it. And you got one hive doing it. If you're doing more than that, you know, over the years, I've tried using a leaf blower. And there's some commercial guys, I guess, that still do. But it's really hard on the bees. So it's not a recommended thing. And then we've used the fume boards, where you have a board that has felt on it, and you put Bego or some other chemical on it, put that on top of the hive, and the fumes come down, it forces the bees down and out. It stinks. So I quit using that. So the bee escapes is what I use, and what most of the commercial guys do now too. And it's something you put under the honey super, and it's so that the bees will go down into the hive and they can't get back in. And this is the one, if you look at the bee catalogs, this is a very popular one now. So what it is, you take the honey supers off, and you need to have, if there's any honey coming in, you need to have an empty or only partially filled honey super remaining on the hive. Don't take all your supers off and not have the bees any place to put the honey. Any question on what I'm talking about? So what we're doing is you lift the honey supers off, set them to the side, put on an empty super on your hive, and then you put this on with the whole side up. And what it is, the bees will go down and they'll wander around until they come out. They have to come out the corners, on these corners they come out. And then when they want to go back up in again, they try to go through here. And you leave that on for about 36 hours. So if you do it one morning, then you take the honey off the next evening, and that will have them pretty well cleaned out. There are several different types. This one, like I say, is in all the catalogs, or you can make it yourself. You have to be better at math than I am, because I've really had a hard time getting these angles to all match up. But that's, you know, it's an inexpensive thing to make, but and it works well. The only disadvantage you have on this one, as I see it, if you're doing it when the weather's really hot, you're cutting off any circulate in those honey supers. The only air that's getting into there is what's going to come up through that little hole in the middle. So you worry about it overheating in there. This is a popular bee escape. If you watch the Canadian, there's a Canadian bee on, Leon Settler. But what this is, you have these cones. See, there's 5 on each side. So you put this up on the hive, and the bees come down, and they come to these cones and come out and go down. When they come back in, they want to come back up through the screen, and they can't. So it's very effective.
Which one works better, the triangle or that one, do you think?
The what?
Which one works better, do you think? of
You
those
know,
two?
for me, they both work about the same.
And where do you buy that one?
Pardon?
Where do you buy those?
I bought mine on Foxhound. I mean, it's an internet company, it says Foxhound Bees. And I tried it last year and it worked great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bought one and then I made the others. Used the pattern. And I tried to find today where it was that I bought it and I couldn't remember, but
There's
you
a
have to
place
do
in
it around,
Auburn
you'll
called
find it.
Deseret Bees and they have them up at their store.
Do they? Good for them. Yeah, that's good. And then this is one that just came out, as far as I understand, just this year. Van Lake is selling this. And what you buy is this little still here. And I think it was $8.50 I paid for it. I noticed that they're $12. I got it on sale. So you just take your inner cover and you screw this onto it. So it goes on here. The beads come down and they come through and they come out the corners. And then can't get back in. And it's rated. The reviews that I read on it were very good. So I haven't used this one yet, but that's how that one goes. And honey, you can take honey off as soon as it's, 75 or 80% capped. Then you can take it off and get the new one in. Anyway, the one hive back here, 2 boxes of honey that's ready to take off. So if we want to do that, we can. But that's my story.
That's your story, you sticking to it.
To it.
And you said it was a Man Lake where you got the little plastic thing?
Yes.
Man Lake.
Yeah.
So Jerry, do you have, because I know you have multiple hives, do you have multiple of those? Because if you're keeping each of
On
these
these?
on 24 hours.
Yeah, well,
Takes a
at
long
least we
time
put for 36. I have, I think I have 6 of these. This year, my birthdays are catching up with me, so I only have 4 hives now. But I ran 20 last year. But 6, that was enough. It would take me a couple of days to get the honey extracted, and so by the time I got those, I rotate those around, that was taking care of it.
All right,
Okay, thanks.
thank you, that's great. Oh, so then the question is, what do you do after you've harvested your honey? And usually for us, because we're either you're in the desert or you're upper elevation or you just anywhere in Utah, it's gonna get dry. And so bees, you still need to think about keeping that population number as high as possible and having as much brood reared as possible. So the suggestion is to feed. If you are starting out with a package or a nuke, you're probably going to continue to feed because you want, ideally, you would love to have all those frames drawn out wax, and have at least some resources on there for the bees to use during the winter. And again, if you're worried about how much honey the bees are storing, then you're going to want to feed. It's not as nutritious as nectar, but it's better than nothing. So, what do you guys do when the honey flow is over?
Just catch up with one thing that I forgot. So, if you've got a new hive, it's your first year, and it's doing well, you're going to have at least 1 frame of honey in there when it gets to be the 1st of September. For all the money you spent and all the times you've gone through, harvest that 1 frame. And the way to do it is to get you a big bowl, get a colander, and set your frame in it, and then take a fork and scrape it down, and then strain it out. don't worry about getting it totally cleaned up because you wanna have a little bit of comb lift on it. Because you're gonna put that back in the hive and you wanna have something that the bees will work on and redo that. And then give them a gallon of syrup and then replace that.
Yeah, so reward yourself for all your hard work.
Yeah, 'cause, you know, you work hard and you spent $1,000 and you got nothing.
The world's most expensive honey.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't make money on hobbies.
Oh, it's like a boat.
Yeah.
A boat's a hole in the water you pour money into.
So I went to this class at Wheeler Farm last Saturday, and Richard Homer, you know, whatever, the president of the Utah Association, he talked for a while, and he said that, kind of surprised me, I just didn't realize, but he feeds all of his hives. After what he calls the dirt comes, he starts feeding. He feeds them all. Yeah, I mean, no package or too deep, you know, hive, he starts feeding. He says, you know,
After he extracts.
yeah, after he extracts, he starts feeding, which I
Yeah,
was
because
surprised.
they
I
don't
said,
get overwintered like the hive in your backyard. They're gonna be sent to California. And so he wants to keep the population up.
Yeah,
So he's probably also supplementing with pollen patties or something as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Should you have pollen patties in the hive right now,
I don't think.
depending on where you live or whatever?
I think there's lots of
Remember, I
pollen
live in the
out there.
desert.
Well, yeah, if you're not seeing some frames that are almost full of pollen, if you're not seeing much pollen, then yeah, I would supplement. Because they're gonna need protein to raise healthy larvae, healthy bees.
But you look at the bees in the morning, you know, 10 o'clock in the morning, they should be bringing lots of pollen in.
Yes.
So just look at their legs and see
Yeah,
if
so
they're
Yeah.
want to bring.
wearing their nylons. Yellow nylons.
Yeah, so like Jerry was mentioning, once you're done with extracting your frames, they're still gonna be pretty sticky. And so you can put them back on the hive, but I've made the mistake of leaving them for a couple of days and then they're full of nectar again. So if you want them to focus on putting that nectar down in the brood box and not out in the super, you know, any of the, like if there's a second nectar flow, sometimes depending on where you live, in August, end of August, beginning of September, you'll get another flow. You want to leave that for the bees, for them to fill up all the empty spaces. But how do you guys deal with your sticky frames after you're done extracting honey? Do you freeze them? Do you just stick them in a box? Do you put them back on the hive?
I put them above my inner cover for about a day or so, and they clean them up.
That's my preference as well. Put them on for a day or two or three and let the bees clean them.
And then how do you store them after that, till the next spring?
I
I put them right back in empty brood or super boxes, and then I have them in an old shed outside, and I have really cold winter temperatures, and mine seem to be okay. Mine stay outside in the shed all winter long.
Just to be safe, I put mine in heavy, the really heavy duty, commercial bags, you know, the big, thick garbage type bags. You have to get special great big ones.
And then you just leave them outside?
I don't leave them outside, I put them in shelves in the garage.
But you have to be careful that you don't have an egg from the moth eggs in there.
Yes.
So I put moth crystals in.
How do you protect from wax moth? If you,
I
if you
freeze
take,
mine.
if you take a frame off and say, well, I'm gonna wait 2 weeks before I harvest, it can be filled with wax moth in no time.
I freeze it.
You freeze it?
I stick it in a garbage bag and I have a horizontal freezer where I can stick.
And then you
Multiple
warm it
frames.
up again before you harvest.
Yeah.
You're
You're
a
best,
patient
you're best
woman.
freezing it, she's right.
But you can do it in a regular freezer. I that's what I did before, I had the horizontal.
It depends on who you're married to.
Yes,
Or you buy a small freezer and you rotate them.
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess I'll be buying a freezer.
yeah,
Buy the freezer.
and that is why a lot of people, you know, you've got one honey super that's full, and they add another honey super, and they then take everything off at the same time, and, you know, shortly after, you know, within a week, you're extracting it all, and that way, you don't have to deal with the possibility of wax moths ruining your honey.
Because a strong hive will keep wax moths out, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and you'll find the larvae, you know, down below on your screen board or your solid board underneath. But that doesn't mean that the moths can't get in there and lay eggs.
Yeah.
So,
But, you know, I forget what the brand is that Van Lathan will sell, but it's parachlorobenzene. Yeah, I'd buy that online and just I just put a whole stack of supers with sealed bottom, and then put a piece of plywood on the top and seal it, and then on the top one, put a piece of newspaper and put a half a cup of moth crystals on it.
You have to
That'll
air
take
them
care of
out really well
Oh,
afterwards.
well, yeah, but see, I'm not gonna air them out, I'm not gonna need them so I'm putting those away in September, and I'm not gonna need it until June. So, there's no smell left, but you can air them out for a day or so before you put them on if you want to.
Home Depot used to sell that kind of parrot, it's a long name, but I recognize it when I see it. But you don't want to get the naphthalene,
No, that'll ruin them. Yeah.
Yes.
okay?
And your friends at Amazon, they got it.
Amazon, yes, she loves Amazon.
yeah. So, reminder, no meeting in July. We will have a meeting in August.
And are we gonna harvest honey in August?
I don't know. Probably,
We'll find out
I don't
then.
know.
I'd like to see how.
Evan Sugden every so often has a honey harvesting party, and he opens it up to everybody in the association, and he's got a very nice setup. You can bring your frames in and extract honey there, but I don't know if we would do that as a club.
Well, the 16th is a Saturday.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Do we mean the 13th or the 20th?
I mean the third Wednesday in August, whenever
That's the
that is.
20th.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I was like, wait.
Who was
Yes,
that?
the
What kind
20th,
of
not the
extraction
16th.
do you have?
I have a 3 frame and then I have a 20 frame.
Okay, I have an E20 frame too.
So, any other questions? All right, well, yes,
Is it okay if I present what I was gonna share?
yeah, why don't you do like a teaser?
That's what I'm hoping to.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's unshare your screen first.
Okay.
All right, that way I'm able to be seen here for a second for those who are online. Is anybody familiar with heritable traits? What do you know about heritable traits? She's into genetics, so what do you think about genetics and heritable traits? What would you want to select for if you could select?
The calmness. more
Okay,
calm.
so bees being calm, what else?
Hygiene?
Hygiene, okay, what else?
Honey producers.
Honey producers, okay. Those are the kind of things that people want. Is anyone familiar with Randy Oliver and the work he's been doing with regard to resistance, mite resistance? That's not just hygiene, it's more than hygiene. He's been doing this since 2017, and he has his entire yard mite resistant right now. He doesn't put stuff on with any of his colonies anymore. The thought that I had was, do we have enough interest here in our group to try to get mite resistance in the Wasatch Front?
Yes.
And
Yes.
if we do, here's the way it works. If you want to have mite resistance, you have to, first of all, keep track of the things that you're going, how many mites are in your hives. You have to track every single hive because you don't know which one might have some resistance. So that means you got to do mite washes regularly. Keep track every single month. If you have a lot of mites, still treat them. You don't want to kill your bees. That's not what we're after. But you want to find the hives that have some resistance. If you find something with resistance, don't treat that hive because otherwise you're helping to produce something besides a mite-resistant bee. Mite resistance, think about this. If you constantly put chemicals on your hives, what is it that you're actually selecting for? Are you selecting for mite resistance? Or are you increasing mite tolerance and you're going to get a lot of mites? That's what you're actually selecting for. So if you want to be able to get mite resistance, you've got to work with your bees, not against them, so that they can get those traits to come out. Okay, so that's what we would be after. The two elements of getting mite resistance into your area is, first of all, you're going to have to find stock. If yours isn't good enough, you want to bring your own, bring some other stock in. Randy Oliver turned his system over to his kids. They're running it, and they sell their mite resistance bees. They've got at least 4 varieties. Okay, they sell them. Something Traz, Saskatraz, is that one? Saskatraz, that's one of the kind they have. He has one that is his own that he bred and just from local stock. He's got 4 different varieties. They're bred for calmness. He works without a veil. He never works with a veil.
Does he have hair now?
He still has hair.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, he does not keep a YouTube page though, so you can't just look up Randy Oliver and say, where's your YouTube page? If you're interested in this, like I was saying, there's 2 aspects of it. One is your queens. Your queens have to be carrying the trait. It is a heritable trait to not have mites in your hives. It is heritable. So having a heritable trait that your queens are producing all of their offspring with that genetic. That's number 1. You get that your first year and you can work with 1 hive that has mite resistance. But to get mite resistance through the Wasatch Front is the second half. You've got to then let those drones go out. So you need to produce drones from that queen, and if you've got queens that are producing bad drones, cull those and only let the good ones out. Then you get where all of the drone congregation areas, they'll have good drones in them. And that will spread the gene among all of the people who rely on that. I'm interested in starting something like that. Can't do it this year, it's already too late. But to do that, what we would also have to do is if we can get queens from that stock to begin producing, share those queens. You don't have to sell them among our group, right? Go ahead, do you have a question?
I wanted to do the Saskatraz bees for years, and so that's what I'm doing right now. I only have the 1 hive, and they are Saskatraz.
Okay.
And so far, I've been really impressed.
Yeah, so as a species, it looked good. It's not
Yes.
quite as calm from what his site says.
No,
But-
they're not as calm as, say some Italians or
Right.
Carolians, but
But he's also got his, I think he calls them Golden West.
yeah.
I
It's
think
also
that's
got
what,
Golden West, but the ones
and
I
he
want
lives in
are
California and he
Saskatraz.
breeds just for the pollination of the almond arbors. But we should be able to bring some of that in, and once we've got that locally, we could share them among each other. If you've got bad queens, are you afraid to pinch your queen if you have to? Probably you're not afraid, but you don't want to because it's an investment. If you've got a replacement queen, let her do her thing.
Some of that they did about 7 years ago in California with the SMRs. They died out.
Well, you don't know if you don't try.
And
The
even
preference.
about 10 years ago, they actually did testing at C.F. Conan's, and how they actually do it is they go in and freeze the drone set, or
Right.
freeze all the cells and see what they clean out.
Has anyone seen, what do they call it, bald brood? Have you ever looked in your hive and seen bald brood pattern? It's where they uncap while it's in the pink to purple pupa stage. Okay, so that is not a bad thing. It used to be thought that it was a bad thing. It's not. That's where those hygienic bees are finding a pupa that has mites down inside. They uncap it. And as it turns out, the mites can only reproduce for about 3 times in their cycle. And then that founder mite no longer can reproduce. So what those bees are doing is interrupting the mite population of being able to reproduce. So there is one point that you might get more mites, and that's, I think it was in, I'm trying to remember the time frame. It's when they start to have more brood that is drone, all the mites want to go into the drone. So when they stop making drone, then the mites come back into the body of the beehive. So you'll see more bees, but don't let that stop you from still, if it's a good hive, they'll clean those back out and you won't have the mites. So I'm interested in starting that, and if that's a good idea, I'd like to be able to get that here in the Wasatch Front. I think that would be an awesome thing.
All right. Megan?
I'm excited about it, and that's largely why I have just the single sassafras, so that I can see what happens with them.
Yeah, and you got to be willing to try. You've got to watch them.
It's risky.
Yeah, don't do it with with everything. If you've got hives that are still producing lots of mite load, you still want to treat those. But at some point, you've got to say, this hive is the one I'm going to try with. If it has low mite, Randy Oliver selects 2% at most of his stock to pull any queens out from. That's all he breeds from, is 1 to 2% of his stock. And they have 0 mite count, month after month. Those are the ones he likes. And that's after 7 years.
Well, maybe when we meet again in August,
Right.
August 20th, put together
I'd like to
some
put a
information.
better presentation.
Yeah.
But this is just an idea. If you're interested, I'd like to present something like that.
So would we as a group just buy a bunch of Randy Oliver's queens?
Well,
Is
that
what
would be
you're
one way, but
thinking?
there are other areas in the world that are mite-free. South Africa, mite-free. Over in the UK, there's areas of the UK that are mite-free. They're doing the same thing. And they developed them not from buying somebody else's stock, but they went to all of the local feral bees. Because the feral bees are living year after year with the mites. They're making it. If we can get feral colonies here, we can develop our own. But that's the idea. You've got to get feral that have been out there and they're surviving. Because they're doing it year after year and they're not getting treated. So that's the idea.
It's always good to try a few different ones.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Thank you.
All right. So, unless there are other questions, comments, I think that concludes the meeting. Do I have a 40-minute drive?
I do have a 40-minute drive.
All right, thanks to everybody who's online.
Mine's only 35.
I'm out here.
Oh.
Okay,
I'm just around.
I used to live